Welcome to this seminar about the result from the AnteNOR project. And for Oslo Cancer Cluster and for me personally and others, this is important for many reasons. But one major thing is that we work in many degrees with how you treat patients with get cancer or even late in the stage, where you only can do so much. So both our politicians, EU and worldwide, you're looking at how can you address cancer earlier on and how can you go to prevent cancer. It is not an easy task, but we are very proud to have been part of the AnteNOR project and working with the different companies, scientists that goes head on to this problem. And today we're going to hear and also discuss a little about the potential and future in this area. So I put the wrong button there. Okay. Yeah. So the AnteNOR project is about implementing polygenic risk score guided breast cancer precision prevention in Norway. And this has been part of a program where both university, AnteNOR, Oslo University Sykehus, Vestre Viken, and Oslo Cancer Cluster. And I think that I won't say much because first now we are going to have some presentations, and afterwards we'll have a discussion. And I'm jumping into your presentation now, Peter. So then I'll just stop talking actually and give now the floor to Peter Padvik. He's the CEO. He's an oncologist, CEO of AnteNOR. And what you're going to talk about is the conclusions. What's come out of this? Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, dear colleagues, hello everybody. Today is actually the last official day of our project, and I tried to give an overview where we are and a little bit where we are not yet with ideas for the next steps. Our project has been in partnership with University of Oslo, Oslo University Hospital, Vestre Viken Hospital Trust, and Oslo Cancer Cluster, and Estonian health tech company AnteNOR. Problem what we have been and addressing and continuing to address is breast cancer, which is the most common cancer among women in Norway, Europe, and worldwide. And actually, if we detect cancer as early as possible, then the treatment is very efficient. And for that, cancer screening programs are implemented in Norway also. All women from age 50 to 69 are invited to mammography screenings. But if we look data, then approximately 17 to 20% of breast cancers are among younger women than 50. And same time, it's not reasonable to screen all younger women, but it's quite clear expert consensus already now that screening should be done according to individual risk levels of women, because they are and may be in same age quite different. Actually, risk stratified screening is already happening in Norway and in other countries. And you can see here recommendations from Norwegian breast cancer guidelines, which say that those women who have a high risk, they should start screening earlier. But the risk factors what are used currently for that are family history, breast cancer family history, or then pathogenic variants in single genes, so-called monogenic pathogenic variants. These most well-known are these BRCA1, BRCA2. They are very important and with strong impact, but they are relatively rare. And then additional important genetic risk for breast cancer comes from common single nucleotide polymorphisms, SNPs. Each of them give limited impact, but if to summarize them together, then we can see clinically meaningful risk differences between individuals, and this technology is called polygenic risk score. So our company, with our background from University of Tartu in Estonia, has developed based on big international consortia studies and also based on UK Biobank and Estonian Biobank data, breast cancer polygenic risk score test for clinical use, which is registered as CE marked in vitro device and is implemented in clinical healthcare. And now our main objectives in the AnteNOR project have been to create additional clinical utility and performance evidence data of breast cancer polygenic risk score for stratified screening to promote and drive clinical adoption with feasibility pilot of AntePC test in Norway to evaluate test impact as new technology for cost effectiveness aspects, also for Norwegian reimbursement application, and in general way develop this risk-based approach also with global impact. Our project was divided into different work packages. At first, health technology assessment, then clinical bioreactor visibility study, which was conducted in Västerviken and also Oslo University Hospital. Then we analyzed scientifically polygenic risk score performance study on Norwegian data, created policy development, and also we have had several dissemination and knowledge exchange activities. I tried to give a small overview about some aspects of these work packages, but we have two other presentations today describing some of them in more detail. So our first package, work package 1 was cost effectiveness analysis of risk stratified breast cancer screening in Norway, analyzing only polygenic risk score impact. And this work was done with partnership with in good collaboration with our Norwegian partner company Kuna, led by Eivind Jørgensen and Kari Kolstad. We analyzed impact, what is the impact of polygenic risk score or AntePC test based screening in Norwegian context if we offer for all women at age 40 polygenic risk score testing. And this was compared against current standards. And the results are concluded here that principally we can show clinical utility with cost-effective way according to Norwegian standards. So there are additional costs for risk stratified screening compared to no screening at age 40, but we can say that in a cohort of 1,000 women, we can avert 1.5 breast cancer deaths. So for 10,000 women, then it's 15, and so on. And the cost of the QALY in our analysis is 389,000 Norwegian crowns. This analysis is summarized into a single technology assessment and submitted also to Norwegian Health Directorate. This is in the process currently, which is ongoing. Now I'm moving to our scientific analysis of breast cancer polygenic risk score performance on Norwegian genetic data. One part of this was directed by Professor Eivind Hovig, who will speak about that today in more detail, but we have had already a peer review publication. And another part is led by Professor Vessela Christensen, which have been in abstract and conference presentations. Actually, this another part is going on, and Eivind will speak a little bit about that also. So then I think very important part has been actual clinical implementation in real life, and this was done in clinical pilot or feasibility study, where lead investigator has been Dr. Tone Hoda, and she will present this data also today here. Now, polygenic risk score technology is new for healthcare, and actually, therefore, there are no very clear consensual guidelines or standards how to use, when and how to use that. And therefore, we gathered international evidence, plus then also evidence and aspects from AnteNOR project, and created a policy paper in what indications should be or could be polygenic risk score used in healthcare. And this is summarized here. At first, management of healthy women in hereditary cancer clinics. As I saw, those approaches are already covered by national guidelines, also by Norwegian guidelines. And actually, principally, we can say that if polygenic risk score is not considered, then this is not the most modern healthcare anymore, because many studies have shown that polygenic risk score modifies recommendations for those women in hereditary cancer clinics. The second indication is so-called opportunistic breast cancer screening. Maybe we can see our clinical pilot also like such a setting of opportunistic screening, where women visit breast clinics. And of course, then probably the most important from population-based health aspect is breast cancer screening programs, which are systematic. Now, if to conclude what we have in AnteNOR project, we have problem description and well-characterized possibilities to solve this problem of breast cancer screening. We have regulatory compliant new breast cancer polygenic risk score test. We have monogenic pathogenic variant testing in Norwegian hospitals. We have validation of AntePC test also in Norwegian genetic data. and we have data from clinical use in our project. Also, we have cost effectiveness analysis, and health technology assessment is submitted to Health Directorate. And also, we have had dissemination activities led by Oslo Cancer Cluster, and some scientific manuscripts are published, some are in preparation currently. But what we do not have is actually such possible work and logistic organization for breast cancer precision prevention. Actually, how this could work in real life. And we do not have public funding yet, but of course we should think what could be practical solutions if women who principally are interested and want such risk-stratified breast cancer precision prevention, how they can get that. And of course, it's not from Antegen's side the best way to say how this could be exactly organized in Norwegian healthcare. But what we see from our experience, also from AnteNOR project aspects and the experience from other projects in other countries, that such genetic-based risk-based screening is most feasible to implement using digital solutions, because simply there are bottlenecks or lack of human resources for such ordinary visits for risk estimations in hospitals and healthcare. And I have described here possible components of this as web page where women can get necessary information. They can give their informed consent, fill a cancer family history questionnaire, then order polygenic risk or testing as home-based testing using saliva or buccal swab sample. And based on family history questionnaire, it's possible to refer them, if necessary, to consultations of medical geneticists for monogenic pathogenic variant testing. And according to test results, they can get then recommendations when and how start their screening and referrals for mammography clinics, which are most close to them. So this could be such one model of clinical implementation. A little bit about such international background. We have similar project like AnteNOR going on currently in Sweden, Portugal, and in Estonia. And in Estonia, our public health insurance fund, who is organizer of public screening programs, is gathered such activity that principally the decision is from the start of next year to implement polygenic risk or based risk stratified screening in Estonia for women from age 40. And there are also involved Tartu University Hospital and University of Tartu. So this approach will be implemented on the basis of AntePC test and our recommendations. Very much thank all our partners in AnteNOR project and in Norway, and we have had really very good cooperation and the best experiences with work with you all. Thank you very much, and I give stage to our partners in AnteNOR project.
Let me just introduce one man that's in Norway, probably knows more about this than anyone. Eivind Hovig. Please, the floor is yours. Super last.
I'm not sure that is the case, but anyway. So I will be presenting on behalf of, as you see, a relatively large group of people, which signifies that this has indeed been a collaboration, a good one. And you'll see a couple of people underlined. These two people are Bayram Akdenitz and Denise O'Mahony, and they are both actually Cypriots originally, as in happenstance has it. So that's a bit strange. And Vesla Christensen and Denise are both here, and they are then one of the other groups that has been collaborating. I'm going to try to squeeze in some information also from their side. And I will just give a very superficial view because of the time. Breast cancer is, of course, a very important disease, and is in Norway the 5th leading cancer cause in terms of mortality. And the genetic susceptibility is a very strong associated factor to those who develop breast cancer, in addition to, of course, a number of other factors that you are probably aware of. And as you also saw from Peter's presentation, there is a difference between the very rare variants in genes, and so you have variants in genes that cause cancer very frequently. Of course, breast cancer, BRCA1 and 2 are very well known, but there are also other cancers that have can cause a high risk of cancer, but these are rare variants, not very frequent in the population. And the polygenic risk scores, they center around those variants that are frequent in the population as markers or sort of indicators of areas of the genome where a risk occurs. And these are here indicated as risk SNPs. And a SNP is an SNP, a single nucleotide polymorphism, which means that has a frequency of at least 1% in the population, which means then that it's a relatively frequent thing compared to the high risk variants. And there's also something called genome-wide association studies, which are essentially casting a net across the whole genome. For certain positions, you examine how the variation or what variants each individual has. And then you do that for those that have cancer, given or some other thing you're interested in, and a group of controls that don't have that. And then you are comparing across the whole genome if there are deviations in the frequencies of these positions along the genome between the two groups. And if there is a deviation in frequency, that is an indication that indeed something is going on in that area of the genome. And at the bottom here, you see a standard plot for these studies, where you see that the higher peak, the more significant the area of in that part of the genome you have a link to the disease or whatever you're looking for. So that means that what you want to do is to have a very wide, fine-grained map of the whole genome of cases and controls on the genomic side, and you can increase the resolution of your net by doing what is called imputation, which means you're lending power from whole genome sequenced individuals, because there is a lot of the genome is inherited at the same time between generations. So that means that you can use that power to increase the quality of the net. And then from there, you can then ask, is there a set of SNPs that will predict a risk or not? What you do essentially is that you sum across a set of SNPs or polymorphisms that you have identified, and then you find out the difference between the high scoring and the low scoring, to put it very easy. And so that means that if you can identify those that have a high score based on that person's combination of SNPs, then that person can be better monitored, obviously. So that is sort of the underlying concept. And to make a long story short, we have been doing this using a Norwegian panel of individuals, which comes from a familial overrepresentation of cancer. So it's not a perfect setting in terms of a population selected cohort, but it is at least we can check if those that have the breast cancer has a higher risk than those not having breast cancers, because we have information about that. And we also have a lot of information on the genomic side, including whole genome sequencing for some as well. And so doing that, we find that indeed we can identify that there are individuals that have high risk that also indeed get breast cancer, and to the similar values as those that have been found in similar studies in Estonia and with antigens. So that is good news. And to just indicate then using the tool iCare, which is a package for calculating the PRS-based age-dependent risk, you will see that for the highest percentile, which is the pink one, you have a 20% risk of developing breast cancer over your lifetime, which is a significant number. And so that you can zoom in on whatever percentile you want, and then define that as something that you want to screen for instance. And as also pointed out by Peter, you can indeed find more in this publication if you want to go that way. And this was then using familial cancer. And then there is a similar study done by Denise and Vesula and their collaborators on sporadic cancers. So these would be individuals where that have contracted sporadic cancer, not due to an inherited mechanism, but sporadic. And then the idea was to see, can you similarly find an increased risk for those with polygenic risk score, high polygenic risk scores. And here you see the so one thing I should mention is that, as you see here, there are 2,680 breast cancers, but a very limited number of healthy controls, which is, of course, a weakness in this study. And this can be developed over time, I believe. And there are also different SNP sets that have been used here. But this is then for 3 different SNP sets, showing that indeed the cases, which are again the pink, have a high risk than the controls, which are then the blue. And the area under the curve is also at least not worse. So this is also a strong indication that you indeed can use this mechanism. And they have also the benefit that they can find out more So here they see how many first of the cases that will be identified with a high risk, and in this case 10% is approximately 256 cases. But the other thing is that they have information of these sporadic ones. We didn't have that because we didn't have information about the cancers, but they have information about the cancers and also tumor characteristics like estrogen status and progesterone status. And you see that these are significantly associated to the polygenic risk score, indicating that both there are correlations and also that maybe they can be used in concert. And you also see that there are other relations as well, like both treatment and response and relapse are all relevant in this context. So that is a snapshot of the sporadic cancer study. And then we have done a little bit more on developing a model for a polygenic hazard score, which is complicating the picture a little bit, but it is essentially to take into consideration the time element of the risk, so that we try to develop then a model of the age of onset of the risk and of the tumor. And in this way, we can try to see if this can help further. And I'm not going into detail here. These are preliminary results, but and we're using the UK Biobank data, 156,000 samples to develop the model. And then these are split into 80% for training and 20% for testing. And then just as a starting point, using a 313 SNP as a starting point, and then using statistics to try to obtain then the SNP effect sizes, and then compare the hazard score with the polygenic risk score of similar nature, with concordance index and hazard ratios as indicators. And just to show you here that these are Kaplan-Meier curves, which is survival curves, and these are this just illustrates that indeed the 98 to 100 percentile, which is the deep red, has a worse outcome, if you will, than the ones on the other side, 0 to 20%, which is the yellow, indicating again that there is maybe some way of doing that, and there are also some real numbers in that context. I'm not going into detail on these numbers, but just point out that we are examining this to try to find out to what extent they can contribute in addition. And then finally, I just wanted to touch on one more thing, as a common saying goes, and it is actually not breast cancer at all. It is colorectal cancer, because we have this familial biobank, and we are interested in various aspects of the heritability of colorectal cancer. And you'll see that one part of this is called Lynch syndrome, which is 1 in 30 colorectal cancer cases has a so-called Lynch syndrome. And what is a Lynch syndrome? Well, that is actually a problem related to genes of mismatch repair in the human. And these are malfunctioning repair enzymes, like also BRCA and BRCA2. They are repair enzymes, but these are repairing other different things. And so in a sense, this is a subset of colorectal cancers that have a genetic predisposition, and we want to see do some work on this, because in fact the Lynch syndrome patients, they have a risk of developing a long list of different cancers, And the question is, can we predict something about what cancers, and can this be used as a tool in that context? And some things have been done for colorectal, for Lynch syndrome and polygenic risk score from before, and in fact they claim that the polygenic risk score does not predict Lynch syndrome, colorectal cancer. And some say that it may slightly influence the colorectal cancer risk in some patients with Lynch syndrome in terms of early onset. But these are not so well defined, and we are going to pursue this somewhat more. But so far we have only come a little bit, and we have also some good results, and I'm just not going to go deep into that, but we find that the mismatch repair genes, which are 4 genes, which are listed here, MLH1, MSH2, MSH6, and PMS2, indeed can be combined with the polygenic risk score to then come up with a prediction that may be of relevance. And so this is on the left, that's the UK Biobank, the totality of that, while on the right side you have the Lynch syndrome, and at this time we don't really have a good statistical match, but we are looking at this. And so the conclusions to get there is that we have calculated polygenic risk scores as we set out to do in the work package 3, and we have done so for germline cases for different polygenic risk score models and imputation pipelines that I didn't go into now. And we have then evaluated different models and identified some good ones. And we have found that the imputation pipelines are relatively similar, and we have found out that we do the same approximate quality as the Estonian similar approach. And we have, for the somatic sporadic cases, found that indeed there is consistency in the distribution also between Estonia and Norway, and it indicates clinical utility, and that there are indeed also associations to phenotypic variables. And so this may give better performance if the PRS, if we can combine it with other predictors, as I previously indicated. And it may be that the polygenic hazard score is also a supplementary tool that can be used, and that indeed the polygenic risk scores can also be applied to other heritable conditions. And one thing I also wanted to say is that we are in fact pursuing this also in the context of now collaborating with including Finland on an application to the Horizon system on the recent call that I believe will be touched upon later here, if I'm not mistaken. So that is what I was going to say.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, we'll move on into in the program. I think it's impressive amount of knowledge coming out and good advices from Ivan there. Now we're going into clinic. I mean, how does this look when you come to patients? And Tone Hovda, you're senior radiologist at Vestre Viken. You are going to present to us the clinical study of using polygenic risk score and the patient feedback. Then I think you push down here.
Okay. Yes, that sounds more familiar. Thank you. Well, I'll present some results from the clinical pilot study that we performed, and it's a paper in progress right now. So the purpose was to explore the potential of PRS as a tool for risk-based mammographic screening. It was a feasibility and logistics study, and also we are interested in the women's interests and experiences. I think Peter said this, but we screen women aged 50 to 69 in Norway based on age as the only risk factor. There is some going to some risk-based mammographic screening based on genetic or family factors. Those who are BRCA1 or 2 and some other high-risk genes positive who will receive annual mammography plus MRI from the age of 25, unless they choose to do risk-reducing surgery, removing their breasts and ovaries. And those with increased familial risk without the gene mutations after genetic assessment, they are usually recommended mammographic screening every year from 40 to 60 years. So in this study, we included women who were aged 40 to 49 as a pre-screening decade, who were referred to our breast center for clinical mammography. They were referred from their GPs to mammography for some clinical symptom, usually. They should have no signs of malignancy after assessment. They were not eligible if they had a prior history of breast cancer or premalignant breast disease, and no prior genetic counseling or testing should have been done. So those were the exclusion criteria. We invited them after the visit to the center via an SMS with a link, with a question, do you want to participate, and so on, and with a link to the consent form and some family cancer history questions. So that we aimed to include 80, that was the goal of the study, and we had to invite 328 women to reach that goal. So it was a response rate of 24%, which I think is interesting when talking about implementing this in mammographic screening, in a risk-based mammographic screening. 24% were interested in participating in this study. It may of course not be directly transferable to a real-life setting, but it's an interesting number. All women had their polygenic risk score calculated. The test was performed at the breast center, or the swab. The sampling was performed at the breast center. We did not use the home kits that Antegenes have, but performed the testing at the breast center, and the swabs were sent to Antegenes for DNA sequencing and calculation of the polygenic risk score. And as I said, I also filled in a questionnaire about the family cancer history and some lifestyle factors. The family cancer history form was reviewed by the medical geneticist from Oslo University Hospital, and they were, based on that, referred to standard genetic counseling or gene panel testing according to the standard criteria in Norway. And I have to emphasize that it's not only the breast cancer family history, but the whole family cancer history. So if the geneticist wanted to do this as usual, and if there were many cases of colon cancer or melanoma or whatever, they were also referred, even if there are no breast cancer cases in the family. So they did a standard family cancer history evaluation. And they got the recommendations from the geneticists based on the family cancer history and the high-risk gene testing. And there was also a recommendation based on the PRS testing. And we recommended the women to follow the most intensive follow-up, either of these. So regarding the PRS recommendations, or the PRS-based recommendations, women with low or average risk, which is a relative risk lower than or equal to 1 compared to the standard population, they recommended standard mammographic screening in breast in Norway. Those with a relative risk between 1 and 2 were recommended to start biennial mammographic screening earlier than the age of 50. That is from the age at which they reached the average risk of a 50-year-old woman. And those with a relative risk higher than 2 were recommended as the prior group to start mammographic screening every second year from the age at which they reached the average risk of a 50-year-old woman. And then when they reached a 10-year risk of, which was twice the risk of an average 50-year-old woman, then they were recommended to do mammographic screening every year. So it's a bit complicated, but I'll show you in a flowchart afterwards. The results from the PRS testing were communicated to the women by mail or by letter with the results of the testing and the recommendations. And they had the option to contact the project manager, that's me, for more information. I got some phones and some emails. They wanted to have more information. And those who were referred for genetic testing by the medical geneticist, they were received the standard communication with the geneticist, which I think also is by a letter, postal letter, with the results and the recommendations. We also sent out a questionnaire to all women 6 to 12 months after they were included, to ask for their experiences with participation. And we also plan to follow the women for 10 years, so to check whether they get breast cancer and whether they comply with the recommendations. I think that's the most important part. Median age, was 45 years. Those women between 40 and 50. We also assessed the mammographic density to see whether that could give us something, and it was half and half with low and high BI-RADS breast density. Regarding the relative risk, 49% had a relative risk lower to or equal to 1, which is as anticipated, I think. 40% relative risk between 1 and 2, and 10% or 12% relative risk higher than 2. And we found no association between PRS score and relative risk and the breast density, but it's a very small sample, so we probably can't say anything about that. It's not powered for that. Regarding the mammography recommendations based on the PRS, 40 women were recommended just to participate in Breast Screen Norway. From the last slide, you remember that 39 had a lower or equal risk, relative risk than 1. But one of these women actually had a higher risk, but she was already 50, so then they were just included in the Breast Screen Norway. 39 patients or women were recommended to start mammography screening every second year before the age of 50, and among them 6 were recommended to start annual mammography later on. And one woman was recommended to start annual mammography from now on. She had a high risk and recommended to start mammography screening every year. Regarding family cancer history, it was, as I said, evaluated by the medical geneticists, and as I said, also they evaluated all cancer cases, not only breast cancer in the family. 21 of the 80 were referred for genetic counseling based on the family cancer history, and I think that's quite a high number, which might probably say something about selection bias in the study, for instance. We did not discover any mutations in the high-risk genes for breast cancer. They actually discovered a mutation that is a high risk for pancreatic cancer, I think, and melanoma. I don't remember, but Ellie was quite eager. We found something. So, and 5 of these 21 were recommended to start annual mammography at age 40. According to the national guidelines for family cancer, breast cancer history. So about 1 in 4 of those who were referred. And then we sent out the questionnaire. We had a response rate. It was an online or web-based questionnaire with a response rate 73%. I think that's probably acceptable. And the vast majority agreed that they would likely follow the recommendations given. Almost everyone also agreed that it was reassuring to have their breast cancer risk assessed. And 86% agreed that all women should be offered genetic testing to assess their breast cancer risk. So the participating women who answered the questionnaire were very positive about this PRS testing. This is perhaps, I think the question was, are you more anxious about getting breast cancer after having the results? And then disagree, neutral, or agree. So 66% were not more anxious for getting breast cancer after the study. And the rest, 33, were either neutral or more anxious about getting breast cancer. And that's probably has something to do with whether they had an increased risk or not. And this is so to say about those with no increased risk, 84% were not more anxious. I think the rest, 16%, were neutral. So, but among those with an increased PRS risk, half of them were not more anxious, and I think the remaining 48%, some were neutral and some were more anxious. So that's not surprising. 80% agreed that the communication of the PRS results was satisfactory, and that also applied to 73% of those with increased PRS risk. A few women commented that they would rather have a personal phone call rather than a written information about their increased risk. Among those who had no increased risk, they were mostly satisfied. There's some limitation to the study. It's a very small study. It's a pilot study of 80 participants. And the women who were eligible for inclusion were already referred to the breast center, so they had obviously some sort of clinical symptom and probably a higher breast awareness or breast cancer awareness than the general population. That's could be. And we excluded women who had a prior history of breast cancer or premalignant breast disease, which are probably more high risk than the population that we included. And of course, there is probably a great amount of selection bias, both regarding study participation as such and also about the response to the questionnaire. But I think that polygenic risk score may be a tool for risk-based screening, breast cancer screening in the future. Of course, we have to discuss at what age it should be implemented, and also the threshold for intervention. As I said, if you use the threshold of relative risk higher or lower than 1, which we used in our recommendation in this study, then obviously half of them will have an increased relative risk. If we increase the threshold for intervention to 1.5 times the relative risk of an average woman, then about 25% would come into the group who were recommended more intensive screening than the standard breast screen Norway. And as I think Peter also said, should probably do this risk-based screening in combination with other factors. And there are, of course, some cancer risk prediction models that can be used and so on. You can use breast density, family cancer history, and probably also in the future some image-based risk by artificial intelligence. That's very interesting and promising, I think. So we need some more studies. Of course. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next one up is to hear what's happening here in Europe. And Sophia, you have a fair overview on that from the Research Council of Norway. Thank you. Please take a stage.
Thank you, Kjetil, and thanks for the invitation. I work at the Research Council of Norway. I'm a national contact point for health in Horizon Europe and also for cancer mission in Horizon Europe. Yes, and it was nice to get the invitation to come here because there is a call in Horizon Europe under the cancer mission, which is very relevant for this group, as we heard Haybund express before as well. So we wanted to take the opportunity to present that call for you here today. And maybe I should also mention that we have a national cancer mission hub where Oslo Cancer Cluster and the Research Council and several other cancer environments are quite active. So we have a good collaboration on that side, which also made us aware of this event and to get the invitation. Yes. So maybe I should say as well that as a contact point, I work to mobilize research environments, Norwegian research environments, to the calls within Horizon Europe, but also to make sure that the Norwegian priorities are aligned. So I also sit in the committees that work with the Commission in order to shape the calls. So we also work to get the Norwegian environment priorities and the Norwegian political priorities in line with the calls. Yes, and the European Commission with Horizon Europe has introduced a new instrument, which is called missions. They're big, ambitious initiatives with goal-based objectives, you can say, goal and time-bound objectives. So cancer is one of 5 such missions. And the goal is, as I mentioned, very ambitious. It's to improve the lives of more than 3 million people by 2030. And that's supposed to be done by tackling cancer throughout the pathway. So everything from both understanding cancer better and the mechanisms, and to preventing cancer, both primary prevention and secondary prevention, and also to early diagnostics and optimizing diagnostics and treatments. And also for patients that have survived cancer or are undergoing treatments and their families to have a better life, so quality of life. So all of these are aspects that are covered under the cancer mission. And there are transversal aspects. Personalized medicine is one of them. Childhood cancer is definitely one of them as well. So when it comes to childhood cancer, in the calls that you have, almost all calls have saying that at least one of the projects that are to be funded is going to be under pediatric cancer or childhood cancer somehow, if it's of high enough quality. But it's not the only one that is targeted, of course. And what's also very important is that is to ensure equity and access to knowledge, research, and care throughout Europe. That's of course very evident when we look at different parts of Europe, but also within Norway we do have differences in care for cancer, so it's relevant there as well. This is an overview. I'm not going to go through this. This is an overview of the calls that have been so far. The ones in color are recent topics. They're open topics at the moment. So there's currently 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 open topics with deadlines in September. Some of them are on more infrastructure, and then we have the one that I want to present for you today, which is this one. It's an innovation action called Accessible and Affordable Tests to Advance Early Detection of Heritable Cancers in European Regions. And here they stress the need to validate, pilot, and upscale easy-to-use genetic tests for early detection of cancers. So it's very relevant for this gang here, yes, and that's and the focus is not on developing very new things, but to build on what we already have and validate and upscale, then pilot and upscale. And they should also be possible to take into regional or national healthcare systems. So that's the preferred thing. So as I mentioned, the deadline is in September, on the 18th of September. It's the focus is on heritable cancers. They should, as I mentioned, validate easy to use, affordable, accessible tests for early detection of these cancers. And you need to collaborate with European regions to facilitate uptake in regional or national healthcare systems. And they can be based on any methodology that is useful to the consortium. It could be genetics, omics, biomarkers, wearables, even anything. And the budgets we have here, it's from 10 to 12 million euros per proposal, so it's big projects. As I mentioned, they wanted to be developed to a high TRL, so a high technology readiness level, really ready to be rolled out in the healthcare systems. And since there's such a focus on collaborating together with regions and getting it implemented, you also need to actually show on a real collaboration with them and include a written commitment from the regions. At least one proposal should be dedicated to childhood cancer. And of course, end users, we just heard that end users are important. They're important to include also here when developing the project. Both, and that goes both for the general public and also the healthcare system as an end users. And they have mentioned a few targeted regions, so you need to have at least one of these regions in there. So that's what we usually call the widening countries. So the countries that may not be as, I don't want to say advanced, but are not at least participating. Yes, emerging countries, and they're not participating in Horizon Europe calls as often as others, at least. Yes, and there's also a focus on preferably working with one of the EIT Health KIC networks. And if you want to know more about them, they had a presentation on an info day just a few days ago that you can watch. Yes. And when it comes to Cancer Mission and Horizon Europe calls, it's very important. The long-term effects are very important, both short-term and long-term effects. And so the results need to contribute to solving the big challenges of the society, and in this case within cancer. So here the focus is on the expected outcome, which is the short-term effect of the project, that the results should contribute to make sure that people and families with heritable genetic risk will benefit from the outcomes of these accessible, affordable early detection tests that's come out from this call. And when it comes to the projects, they're large collaborative projects. It's one coordinator, several partners, at least 3 legal entities from different EU countries or associate countries. At least one have to be from an EU country. EU countries can get funding. Associated countries such as Norway can also get funding. In addition, low and middle income countries can get funding. Apart from these countries, most countries can participate, but the rest cannot get funding in this one. And I mentioned an info day. So if you're interested in this topic, I do recommend to watch that info day. There's also coming up a brokerage event where you can both learn more about the topics, and you can meet with others with similar interests in this topic and discuss possible collaborations. Usually not very many coordinators at such events, but it's still a good arena to build your network and find others with similar interests as yourself. And sometimes you do have projects that come out of those events as well. Yeah, and we can send I'm sure we can send the presentation afterwards, so you get the links in here as well if you want that. Yes. That's and if you need assistance, if you want help with interpreting this topic or anything, then you're more than welcome to contact me, and I will help you along the line. And you also, most of you also have very good EU advisors at your institutions that you can contact, such as Marine, for instance, here at Oslo Cancer Cluster. Thank you. That's
Thank you. So yeah, and all the speakers will now take a break until 14:30, and then we'll have a panel discussion. Thank you. Can we stop this or? Stop. Just.
Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. So this panel discussion about home testing and production. And there's very many angles we can have to this subject, so I'll just jump right into the cervical cancer screening participation is suboptimal in most cases. You have assessed whether HPV self-sampling may increase screening participation amongst long-term non-attended in Norway. What did you find?
Well, we did a randomized control trial with this home test. So it's a swab. You can do a vaginal test at home, and then you submit it for testing it to a lab. And we addressed women who hadn't screened for at least 10 years and randomized them into 3 arms. So the one control arm, they just got the regular reminder letter, and then the self-sampling arms, one they could order a test, and the second one they got the test sent without soliciting it. And we found a huge difference in participation between the 3 arms. So those that just got the reminder letter, they participated only 4%, while those that got the send to all, as we call that arm, so unsolicited, they participated 28%. So it's a huge difference. And that difference translates into a public health gain. So we also found a huge difference in the diagnostic yield between the 3 arms. So, and the opt-in arm, where you can order the test, is intermediate between the control arm results and the central arm results. There was a huge effect both in terms of participation and in terms of the precancers and cancers patients.
So what does that mean if you would give a politician or someone from the ministry advice? What would this finding mean?
I think this finding was very significant for the assessment that was made regarding self-sampling in the Norwegian cervical screening system, because the results were quite convincing.
Yeah.
Obviously, this self-sampling device addresses some barriers that the women have with having a pelvic exam, and also this population is a high-risk population because they haven't attended screening in at least 10 years. So they've had repeated reminders that they haven't acted on. So at least 4. In this high-risk population, giving them this stronger cue to action, which is the self-sample, which is much stronger than just getting a letter saying you have to order an appointment at your doctor. It urges them to do something, and our results show that. And I think it was, it's important knowledge to have when you are going to change something like screening program.
So the short version, more build incentives or build up home sampling possibilities. Is that the short version?
Yeah, and you can also, you can also use this in a sort of risk-based way, right? So you can opt to give it to, for instance, the long-term non-attenders like we did, and it gets similar yields as we did. But you can also opt to do it to other groups with other risk profiles. And we've also looked at like the cost effectiveness of doing this in various ways, and the bottom line is that it's always cost effective, whatever way you do it.
Okay. So I did a mistake here because I know who you are, but maybe not everybody knows. So maybe if I can take a short round and you can present yourself. Sorry for this, both of you and the audience. So who are you?
Okay, Yeah, I didn't say. So I'm Bo Flerting Hansen. I'm now at the National Institute of Public Health at the Infection Control Department. I used to be at the Cancer Registry, and this randomized controlled trial I was talking about was from when I was at the Cancer Registry, and it was funded by the Cancer Society. But I'm a researcher.
Come on.
My name is Karl Arne Johannessen. I'm a former cardiologist. I have a PhD in heart medicine and one in economy. I'm now researcher of technology at the Intervention Center at Oslo University Hospital. And I was invited into Tigeni 2.5 years ago, and I think that's very clever guys. And I think they have a very interesting concept, which I can come back to.
Tigeni as a company, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sara?
Yes, my name is Sara Undamjeba, and I'm head of the prevention section at the Norwegian Cancer Society.
I'm Peter Patrick, oncologist and founder and CEO of AnteNOR, a company who has brought the polygenic risk of AnteNOR tools for
So we send it, we send it back and forth?
Yeah.
Okay. So, Sara, what's Kreftforeningens or the Cancer Society, Norwegian Cancer Society position to cancer home testing?
The Norwegian Cancer Society, we think that this is a good idea, and I think the results from the program is one of the solutions to increase the participation in national screening program. In Norway today, 70% of the women are participating in cervical cancer screening program, which means that 30% are not. For us, our goal is to reach 100%. That's probably not realistic, but we definitely need to do more to get more to test. And we also know that 60% of the women getting cervical cancer. And of course, cervical cancer is actually we can eliminate cervical cancer. We can also probably reach and we are.
And let's hear from Karl Arne. Together, you have some solutions for home testing. What's that?
We are developing diagnostics as a service. We are combining different elements to build logistics and biological testing at home. We are developing which symbolizes that we want to be in symbiosis with other actors in healthcare. We have two projects. We have one project where you can order by your ordinary post deliverance package, where you take a capillary. You can post it back and you will have 40 different samples. Any kind of biological sample from that. The urine, saliva. We are now developing our second project, which is this little device here, where you can have it home. You can buy it for like €50. You keep it in your home. It's guaranteed for 2 years. You can reuse it many times. You can use it on your family. You can log on to this and the other solutions by using digital on-logging function. It's now integrated with the Norwegian National Patient Record. So if I authorize my GP to see the analysis I do with this one, he can read the answer after 15 minutes. Also use a capillary test here, which I break into this strip, which is here. Go on to the mobile phone, and the mobile phone transfers this to the National Patient Record. Depending on what kind of analysis. We are doing now, this is CE approved, it is IVDR class A approved. We are now doing usability study this fall to make it B classified. Anyone without the healthcare implement this in the community healthcare, for example, from this fall. As you can imagine, and what we say here, we say either you are a healthy person or a patient, we will eliminate that you have to travel to a laboratory. As you can do it in your home. You can have a doctor, I need you to test in 3 days once again, or stuff like that. So we are now developing this so also patients can take the analysis. But imagine a nurse visiting a home patient at 10 o'clock in the evening. She has got fever. Is wondering, is there an infection coming? Then she could do CPR, CRP, or measure some tests. But tell her yes, she has to go to hospital or after the service change. I've been doing home services for 15 years as a GP. If you come home to a patient with chest pain, you can do a test indicating whether there's a myocardial troponin, whether there's a myocardial infarction developing, and stuff like this. So this is giving answer within 15 minutes. It's whereas our first service is more routinely very useful if you are taking samples with regular intervals. For example, four times a year, once a month. We can plan so you will have it in your mailbox before you need to take it.
But so, I mean, Gen is one company that has one solution, AnteGens have another solution. Both of them goes to patients where they provide some information where you get data points to change or intervene with the course of a patient treatment, right? So, you have looked at this from a researcher perspective, right? Are there positives but also challenges with this? Could you reflect on some?
Do I need to push something here?
No, I think it's working.
Yeah, I think there are challenges. Obviously, with a feasibility study sounds really useful. I mean, you should try it out first. And I think also what we saw with the self-sampling device that we used, which is pretty simple to use actually, and with quite good instructions to use, we actually saw that there is some socioeconomic differences in how this device is used also. So you get more use in the higher socioeconomic levels than in the lower. And we also saw some differences in terms of country background. And I think this is something to be aware of whenever you do something that's going to be used by the users themselves. So yeah, it's not something that should stop us from doing it and I'm not suggesting that, but it's something I think you need to be aware of and try to minimize the effect of.
That's one.
It's working.
It's working. It's working.
That's one of the topics we have been working with, because as of today, there are no financing solutions for such home tests. If you go to the laboratory, the public healthcare pays for it. But it should also be like, if sometime in the future there will be public payment for this, it should be only paid by public payment if a doctor has asked you to take the test. If I want to take a test every week just for my comfort, that should be not be refunded by the public economy. That's very important, and we are also very careful. We don't want to push this. You should take this many times a year to control your cholesterol and stuff like that. That's not the way we work. But I think the first big step would be to get some kind of public financing, which should start with the gatekeeper of healthcare, the doctor. That's very important.
Yes, when it comes to self-sampling for HPV, the Norwegian Cancer Register is now distributing the test to all the GPs in Norway. So they will also have the opportunity to provide a self-sampling test to the women that don't want to take the test at their office, and it's also a good way to start a discussion or a conversation about the importance of taking an HPV test and participate in the cervical cancer screening program. So I think also that the GP is important to include here.
If they're allowed to ask questions.
We have an eager. Did you have a comment
Just
before we?
a very short comment. So I think one thing is that you should get it funded so that everybody has the sort of equal access to it. Okay, that's number one. It's important. But the other thing that I was also alluding to is that there's also differences in, I don't know what it is. Is it health literacy or something that you also need to be aware of even after you've financed it to everybody, that you should try to compensate for.
You had a comment before we let on the audience here? Okay, audience comment, please.
Okay, hi, I'm Richard. One question. Why did you choose the GPs to do the distribution of the HPV test, and why didn't you do it through MinHelse?
I actually don't have the answer to that question because I'm not the one that made that decision.
Okay.
It was made by the Norwegian Cancer Register, but I don't know, Bo, you might know the history.
I'm not part of the screening program, but I think they started out with doing it via the GPs as a sort of a soft start, so that you can address it for those that maybe have the very highest need. And the plan is to change and to make this offer to more accessible to larger groups after a while. But it takes, this is another thing, if you want something to enter into something as big as a screening program, then the implementation and planning phase is considerable. It's different from doing a study with 80 patients. There's a lot of infrastructure and logistics that goes into it. So there is a process, and the use of the self-sampling device for the cervical cancer screening is not going to end with it only being available through the GPs. It's just a very first initial step.
Yes, but also it's important if you test, if you are HPV positive, then you need to do a follow-up test at the GP or a gynecologist. So it's important to not move away from the GPS on this matter. We need to include them and have them as a part of the prevention work.
So let's look at, let's take for granted that precision prevention makes sense to do. We have evidence to do that, and we also see that home testing is a way to activate population to do that. So Peter, you run a company that are also present in more markets, more different countries. Are there things you have seen in Norway or things that you see in other countries that's worth reflecting on to do this?
Yes. At first, about Norway, we starting the project. We knew actually that Norwegian screening programs have been on good level because, for example, exactly for cervical cancer screening, our organizers of cervical cancer screening in Estonia have received advice also from Norway. and now including home-based testing also. And this is also implemented in Estonia with cervical cancer, with very similar experience as you described. Now, speaking such broader experience beyond our project in Norway, we have tested now genetic-based breast cancer screening using different channels. For example, in Estonia, we tested in our study home-based testing using digital telemedicine channel, GPs, pharmacies, and also breast clinics. And most quickly worked and most easily worked actually this home-based telemedicine channel. All others worked also well, but this very clearly shows that actually women need for such approaches different options, not one model. And similar in other countries, we saw that, for example, in Sweden, in our similar project, this telemedicine channel worked more quickly and efficiently. And in Portugal, where we have our project through breast clinic, this takes longer time. And maybe for some women it's more reasonable and they want additional consultations. They would like to go to clinics, but many others, they prefer as comfortable as possible to get this test done on home basis. This is such current experience. And of course, it's very logical because we use more and more online and digital services everywhere in our life, and same is in healthcare. So no need to visit every time doctors.
But I mean, you have studied health economics as well, so you can easily see that there's an economic argument to not bring patients into a hospital if you can help them at home, anywhere. And then, but you also at the same time has this challenge with what about equality and how do we ensure that when they are used, not used differently, but also how do we pay for this stuff? How do we pay for this activity? And I think that that's a long discussion, but still, are there some, Peter, I send it back to you again. Have you seen countries, municipalities, or public parts that has a model which you think could be copied elsewhere? And secondly, from the things you are doing, because you also provide it to private, also to patient directly, do you see that working, or are there other models that you, because my point is that both again, and you represent private companies, and private companies need to make a profit to survive, otherwise these solutions won't be there. So you as a researcher or as a society or others, there will be home testing in this form. So the question is more, have you seen viable models of business where home testing for prevention actually works?
As a doctor myself, I actually very much support equal access to healthcare services. This is one thing. And my experience is currently that, let's say, public payers or healthcare organizations, they are quite conservative. And I think actually the cervical cancer also in Estonia is a very good example, because we have had even bigger problems with engagement of women into cervical cancer screening. And then from international experience came this home-based cervical cancer screening. And this was very, at first this was tested in a pilot project, and then this was implemented now routinely for cervical cancer screening. So this is very clear model that if we have a problem with engagement of individuals into preventive services, then home-based testing creates such more efficient additional options. And actually, if we think back into COVID era, then we saw also that vaccinations, for example, which are also preventive services, to achieve such high vaccination rates, it was also necessary to use very different models or possibilities to offer vaccinations to individuals to achieve high vaccination rates. And I think the same is here in cancer prevention.
You got a comment?
Yes, well, I have a major concern about these solutions. I'm quite sure that the quality, the safety of these will develop and be 100% in a few years. I have been a cardiologist for 40 years, so I observe that today we implant heart valves as day surgery, whereas in the start of my career they were hospitalized for 3 weeks and on sick leave for half a year. Right? If everybody buys this and starts testing themselves, they will in between find some abnormal values. And if they then start running to the healthcare, I have found deviation of one of my parameters. That's a very challenging development. So we need some kind of gatekeeping for funding such solutions. But at the same time, it's obvious that we save the society for travel costs, for use of health personnel, which we already have big troubles to recruit. Instead of nurses going back and home and use 1 hour at the patient, you can fix the status very quickly and go on, right? So, but we have a lot of models for digitizing home services, but we have no way of financing that one.
We have some more minutes, so we'll just take that. I think that you point to a very important aspect, and if you paid out everything out of pocket in health, it would be easy for a person to say that the total I pay to have this intervention, understand this, that will decrease, I'll go for this option. But when it comes to this kind of intervention, then the hospital may lose value. They lose some activity and lose money to take the test at home. The municipality paying for it may not have that money to pay for it. So they need to argue. So the economic and societal value out of doing this is diverted into many different actors that will not see it as you as individuals. Any thoughts from the panel how to deal with this?
Yes, I fully agree, because I know, for example, in Tartu University Hospital in Estonia, income from lab services is very important from economical point for hospital. But I think that the primary interest should be interests of end users or patients, actually. So, because if to say so, that why to do cancer prevention if cancer treatment is very profitable for hospital? It's nonsense. I think we should prevent cancer, and I think that therefore there should not be such calculations in healthcare that if we do something better for patients, then we lose money for hospital. There should not be such situation. Then we have something wrong in healthcare.
Sarah, you had a...
Well, we definitely need to accelerate prevention, and we need to succeed. We know that the healthcare system will face huge challenges in years to come, and it won't be sustainable if we continue to do what we are doing today. So I think we need to be more brave. We need to test, and we need to accept to fail. But I think it's much better to never get cancer than to survive cancer. And I don't think anyone wants to get a cancer diagnosed. So we need to upscale and we need to succeed on this topic.
Some last comments, Carl.
I think we have to reimagine our economic models, because as hospitals are struggling with increasing treatment costs, you save money, but in 20 or 30 years, right? So we don't consider these budgets or these economic bets as one coherent system. And that's what we really have to recalibrate and think over.
Oh.
Yeah, I agree with everybody actually, but I mean, I think also you need to overcome all this. You need good science. I think that's number one. I mean, if you want to, I mean, you want to spend your money wisely also. So if you have a good evidence base for some new interventions, you know, whatever it is, then yeah, you're better off than if you don't. So that's one thing. It's an obvious point, but I think it's a very important one. I was also thinking that an experience from the cervical cancer side that's also been alluded to by others, but I think it's of wider relevance is that the self-test, the home test, is very useful for many people usually, but it's also important to keep alternatives for those that don't think they can control this procedure and the terms of taking this test themselves. So you also need some other alternatives to the home test, ideally, so that you can also cater for those.
Thank you for the good reflections and discussion. I think that we didn't solve all aspects here, to be honest, but I think we raised some important questions. Science is important, yes, but there are also dynamics here between the different actors that we also need to think through. How could that be navigated, and how do we avoid that screening build inequality, or that we have system that would incentivize so you get more testing in certain areas. So I think that there's many things to be both studied further on and discussed further. So yeah, thank you to the panel, and we'll continue the discussion.
Close now, yeah. Actually, I have one